I don't care what anybody says. I mean, you could see it. You could hear it. I reacted in such a way that when they hired him and heard his first comments, I'm like, oh, boy, there's something wrong with this guy.
Oh, we made fun of that for months and months.
For years and years and years. I mean, for as long as he was here. And, none of this crap surprises me anymore. I mean, and it's really unfortunate for the women who had to go through it. He's going to pay a dear price for it. Again, Sandy Alderson's going to get dragged into this because, Sandy hired him back in 2017. And, how does Sandy Alderson know any of this? I don't know. I'm assuming that somebody over there at the Cleveland Indians said, oh, this guy is great. He's going to be awesome. And plus, you can hire him on the cheap, and you basically get what you pay for. And I don't know. Does any of it surprise you?
It's an interesting question. And I know what you're saying about nothing surprises you in this day and age when it comes to creepy stories like this and this behavior. I'll agree with that part of it. Quite frankly, though, with Mickey Callaway, in seeing him for a couple of years, goofy is the word that you're right. He just would laugh. It was like huckleberry stuff, like, we saw him a couple of times in person. He was at an Entercom event. He just seemed like aloof, sort of a little bit of a country bumpkin type of guy. So when I did see that this behavior that he was engaged in, allegedly, and there's a lot of text messages there that seem like it's factual, and pictures of him shirtless in some sort of construction gear, holding a chainsaw next to a tractor and a hard hat that he sent somebody that's just very bizarre. Yeah, I was a little surprised just because of his personality. It seemed like the take I had on Mickey Callaway, I'm not going to change now because of this coming out of what I thought then. I mean, now, obviously, I think differently of him. But, when he left here not knowing any of this, I was like, this is a guy who's in over his head. He was inexperienced. He was someone that shouldn't have been a manager. And he was, goofy and, that's what I thought Mickey Callaway was. Now, seeing this, I've got a completely different take on his life. And you can add also creep and harassment and all those words to it. But, yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I got to be honest with you. I was a little bit surprised that he was involved in this, but not surprised that we have another story like this on our hands, because I feel like there's lots of this behavior that is being checked for the first time ever. And if you're Mickey Callaway, if you're Jared Porter, and you're sending these things to women, reporters, and nobody's responding to you, and it's not a consensual back and forth, and you end up sending naked pictures or half-naked pictures of yourself to, what in the hell are you thinking to continue with that behavior? I mean, these 60 unanswered text messages from Jared Porter, all these unanswered text messages that we're seeing in this athletic story with Mickey Callaway. It's like, at what point do you say, I've got a problem? To see this and continue this is just, it's mind-boggling to me.
The other interesting thing about all of this is Mickey's comments in regard to this. Is, he basically wrote back to the Athletic saying, I'm aware of all these allegations. I understand it. And, at the end of the day, I'll have an answer and I'll be able to go into more detail. There is no way when you read the accusations that this was consensual.
Oh, no. I mean, you see the text messages, you see the pictures. It was multiple women over a span of years in 3 different organizations. Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems pretty rock solid. And then when you see these text messages, you see these pictures, and it is Mickey Callaway. It's not a Photoshop. I mean, you want somebody to be able to respond to the allegations, but to me, I mean, there's a lot there.
Man, this has been quite the 2 months for the Mets. Holy crap.
Man, I tell you, I don't want to go down, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Joe Beningo. I've always loved Joe Beningo, and I wish him a happy retirement. But there's a lot of times that I don't want to think like him, and I don't want to go down that Joe Beningo at this. You could change the uniforms, you could change the owner, it's the same freaking crap over and over again. But sort of like that's how I'm kind of feeling right now with the Mets, where we thought we were getting a new regime change. Everything was going to be different with the Wilpons. It was great. Steve Cohen comes in. The Mets are going to be Dodgers East. And what has happened since then? They had to fire their general manager because the guy's a pervert. Their manager that they had here for a couple of years is now blasted across the country for his harassing behavior. The owner has to bail out of Twitter because he's getting harassed because he's involved in some crazy stock market stuff, and then he ended up tweeting some things that were condescending and weird, and then he had to get out of there because he was being challenged by the internet. I mean, this is, and Sandy Alderson, who we like, and we've talked about many times, being a man of integrity. He's a Marine. He's going to get it right. You bring him in. He's hired 2 guys that have had this on their record. Now, those are the questions that he's going to have to answer. Now, I know that you sort of, you change your opinion on Jared Porter. At first you were saying, hey, Sandy, how do you find out this stuff? And then someone you had told me.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering. Yeah, well, I'm just wondering about this whole situation. Did they know anything when Sandy was there? Now, remember, Sandy got sick, in 2018?
Yeah.
And Mickey was still here in 2019. Isn't that right?
Sure.
Or was it 17 and 18? I forget which one it was.
But he was the one who hired him, and apparently this stuff had happened in Cleveland. And if you read the story in The Athletic, it's like, oh, this was the worst kept secret in baseball.
How do you not know? In other words, if you're Sandy Alderson, how do you not know this?
See, it's hard. Yes, that assumption was being made in the article. But once again, I don't know their process. Sandy Alderson said after Jared Porter, he's going to have to go through an FBI investigation the next time with these things. They make it seem in writing this story and then the Jeff Passan story in ESPN that, just the next level of questioning would have led to something. Even more so with this Mickey Callaway situation than even Jared Porter. But, do you ask reporters that are covering the team? What do you know about Mickey Callaway?
I mean, most ways when you are hiring somebody, if you can get to their records, that's the other thing. If you can actually get to any records that are on file with a previous employer, which is good luck at that. I mean, that's the thing. Look, he hired, I don't know who recommended Mickey Callaway to the Mets. Somebody recommended Mickey Callaway. Now, I don't know if it's the old boys network that's going on here, because that's how Jared Porter got here too. And this is going to be, it's another just absolutely mind-boggling wake-up call of the way that they have to now go hire people.
Yeah.
And I still feel like, Cleveland's got game in this, because if this were known in Cleveland,
well, yeah.
I mean, then, Cleveland is the one that's got to do something about it first, and then when he comes here, and then if they find out about it here. Now, the question is, was there an investigation while he was here as manager of the Mets? Did anybody file any sort of complaint against him? How would you know about it if somebody doesn't file a complaint? That's the only thing I would say in any sort of defense of Sandy Alderson.
Yeah.
And this is like, if you don't know about it, if somebody is not complaining about it, then what would you do about it? Or how could you do something about it?
Right. So there's 2 questions. One is, did anything happen when he was the manager of the Mets, and did anybody know about it? There's that.
It sounds like yes, and yeah. Well, no. It sounds like yes, something did happen.
Right.
But nobody knew about it.
That's what it sounds like, according to the Athletic report. That yes, indeed, there were 2 New York-based reporters. That's how they identified them in the story and gave them pseudonyms. But said that Mickey Callaway was involved with 2 New York-based reporters. So obviously this behavior was going on when he was Mets manager. But was it reported? Did anybody know? Was it just the stuff that had been talked about? Amongst the reporters, it never got any farther than that. I don't know. And the other part of the question is, what could Sandy Alderson have done, if anything, to have known about this with Mickey Callaway prior to hiring him? And that's the same thing with Jared Porter is. So there was one person in the Cubs organization who apparently knew about this. There was at least another person who knew the reporter for the Chicago Cubs that she confided in, helped me respond to this guy. But there wasn't like widespread throughout that everybody knew this.
All right, so Jared Porter burned the Mets, okay?
Yeah.
And they have, according to Sandy Alderson, have taken steps now. And there are ways to go about it where you could do a forensic investigation into somebody's background by saying, hey, give me your phone, give me this. And, if there are, private messages on there between you and your wife or whatever, that's one thing. It's another thing if there's other things going on that we need to know about, because we do not want to get left with standing at the altar here trying to answer questions of how you got here.
Right.
So, and if somebody says, no, you can't do this investigation, so to speak, then you're not going to get the job. You're just not going to get the interview, and you're not going to be the guy that's going to run the franchise. So that's where they are today. That's not where they were when they interviewed Mickey Callaway in the first place, and that's not where they were when they interviewed Jared Porter. And they have learned, I think Sandy Alderson especially has learned a very embarrassing but also valuable lesson as to how to do this and to stay out of this mind-numbingly fraternity. There's like a fraternity, it sounds like, within, and I've always felt this way anyway, within professional sports, where certain things are just going to be, accepted, and those things have got to be removed. And the only way that you could do that is by things like this happening, and then the next generation or the next group of people that come from behind, whether it's a woman, a man, or whatever, it's basically got to be held to a higher standard.
It's got to be a different process. And I think that one of the things, and I know that it's dangerous to go and ask media members who are covering these teams what they think of a particular person, because there's some guys out there that you don't get along, or maybe the person doesn't want to answer the questions. But you're going to have to. I think that's going to be another part of the process. When you hire somebody, it's like, all right, what were you? Forget about what you thought about his handling of the bullpen. Forget about that. I understand that. What did you know of this person day to day when you covered them? And is there anything that I need to know? Maybe that's part of the process.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just think there's kind of a, there's a natural adversarial position between media and the teams that they cover.
Sure.
Some people are friendly and some people are professional with one another. But, if things are going bad and media are writing bad stories, then there's a natural adversarial situation between front office and media. And it's very unlikely, I think, that a front office person is going to be asking media members about hiring somebody.
Yeah, but all I'm saying here is what do you learn from this? You learn that people in baseball have vouched for these two guys, meaning Jared Porter and Mickey Callaway. Mickey Callaway did a great job with the Indians pitching staff. Jared Porter did a nice job with the Cubs and the Diamondbacks. Okay, the people that he's worked with, hey, this guy could be a manager. He could take the next step. Okay, well, the things that we didn't know about them is that they were engaging in harassing relationships with media members or a media member. So if I'm Sandy Alderson, I'm saying what I learned from this situation when I'm hiring somebody is I can't only just take the word of the male colleagues that they're working with and working for. I'm going to have to get another opinion here.
Well, that's why you say to that prospective hire that, look, we're going to be doing a forensic investigation basically into your life, and if you want the job, you're going to have to be pristine. If you don't want the job, then you just say no to this and walk away from it. That's basically what it has to come down to. And then the reality is whether or not one of these two guys, are willing to say, hey, I got into it with this one. I sent pictures to that one. Forget it. That would be like, all right, goodbye. See you. Yeah. You're not going to get the job.
Right.
So it's a really weird kind of situation that I think the people that are hiring people find themselves in. But as we move along in this world, you find out different things, and you try to nip them in the bud before it ever even gets to that point. Now, and the Mets are learning a valuable lesson, as I would say, is every other, company in the tri-state area. Now, if you're a public company, kind of like a sports team is, you would think that you've learned a significant lesson in watching the Mets go through this. But, who's to say that, this couldn't happen to any one of these teams?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and it has. There's been other teams involved. The reason why, we're talking about the Mets so much is...
But I'm just talking about the other sports in the area, in New York.
Right, yeah. But, also, Mickey Callaway was the Mets manager. Jared Porter was...
the Jets.
Right, the Mets general manager. Yeah, and happened with, happened with the Jets with Brett Favre in that situation. So, it is a lesson learned, but there are going to be people that said, why did it take you this long to learn the lesson? There's going to be those criticisms for Sandy Alderson, and he already answered them, with Jared Porter. Now he's going to have to answer them again. And I don't, and it's tough because what we know of Sandy, he's got to be mortified by this.
I'm sure. You saw the statement he put out last night.
Yeah, right.
Of course he's I would imagine shocked by it. But again, I go back to the first day they hired Mickey Callaway, man. I'm just like, if we could ever find that show, just listening to my comments in regards to the way that he carried off that press conference.
That was a totally different thing.
It was.
You didn't think he was capable of being a good manager. I don't think you thought at that moment he was capable of sending.
I just thought there was something goofy about it, the whole thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, goofy for sure. I mean, when I did all the Mickey Callaway laugh impersonations and the oh shucks and all that, I just thought he was a guy in over his head in a city that was unfamiliar to him. It was like more cut out for the South and a slower pace and like it jokes and they fell flat here. It just wasn't. It was a terrible fit. I didn't think he was a creep. Like I didn't think that, and I can't say that today. That I thought that then. But I think it now because of all the evidence.
Here's what I would say. I would say that Rob Manfred has got to do something. He's got to do something with each Major League Baseball. And I'm sure, I guarantee you, because I know that the NFL has gone to great lengths to really try to root out all of this kind of stuff. And I'm assuming that.
In what ways, though? Like, what are the ways?
Well, there are ways that the commissioner's office can basically reach out to every single owner. They have their owners' meetings, and this has got to be topic number one. It's got to be topic number one. It just has to be. And they have to be, and teams have got to be willing to share all the information, all the different HR situations that they all find themselves in, like all companies do.
Sure.
There's HR companies, HR problems, all across the spectrum. And it's one of the things that, people have been fighting against for years and years and years. And every time something like this happens, then all of a sudden it sheds a light on it again. So I would say that if you are a commissioner of a league, if you're Gary Bettman, if you're, Adam Silver, if you are Rob Manfred or Roger Goodell, these are examples that you can use. And I know, look, we go through training here.
Oh, yeah.
We go through training at CBS.
You just had to complete it before the end of the year.
That training may not be enough.
Yeah.
But that training may not be enough in the fraternity that is men's professional sports. And as more and more women become more and more involved in the sport, whether they're covering it, whether they're coaching it, whether they're GMing it down in Miami, right? Mm-hmm. So there are going to be issues that are going to arise. And those are issues. Those I believe you have to get out in front of those things. And that's why, the commissioner should learn a valuable lesson here and make sure that every team understands. Now, I know every team individually has their own HR department, and that's what these people are responsible for. They're responsible for, if there is a complaint, if there is something, then they have to fully investigate it. They got to come to an answer.
Sure.
And they got to make a determination as to whether somebody is guilty of something, if they can find that out.
Well, so let me ask you, you're good at this stuff of like being the person in a room who is going to sort of command it and tell people like this is the way that things need to go. If you're Rob Manfred and you get all the owners together and you say, we've got these issues here. We got this Mickey Callaway issue. Multiple teams are involved. Got this Jared Porter issue. Multiple teams are involved. Instead of saying you got to do a better job, what else do you tell them?
Well, the other thing, too, is I just think, like in the case of the reporters covering the teams, those reporters have relationships with the PR staff of all those teams. You have to make it aware to all the PR staff that anybody that is dealing with any one of your players, your coaches, your front office people, they have to know that if there is an issue that is uncomfortable, that issue has to be brought up.
And it's easier said than done.
I know that. Yeah. I'm just giving you, like, if I could give you a panacea and say, look, this is the way it should be. I think there has to be open communication between the people who represent the club and the people who are covering the club. But I also would say there has to be open communication within the people who work within the building as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just the writers, but in this case it happens to be the writers. In other cases it may be somebody else within the building. So I don't. You just have to continually, beat it over everybody's head that this is the way that we're going to do business, and this is if there is an issue that does arise from any sort of non-consensual relationship, it needs to be brought to the forefront. It does.
Well, I also think that maybe an organization can right off the bat sort of discuss how if something's going on, we want to know about it because we understand it's tough to come forward in these instances. There is fear of retaliation. This is a career that a lot of you have chosen that you don't want to go away, and for whatever reason you think that maybe speaking up in a spot like this when it's a high-ranking official is going to. But if there's something inappropriate going on and it's factual, and we investigate it and we find out to be true, then, obviously we need to know about this.
And here's what I would say. I would say, look, if somebody is sending you a photo of themselves, of some sort of genitalia or a shirt off, and asks for a nude photo back, that would be considered harassment.
Well, yeah, of course.
I mean, and something has to be said, and you just walk into the PR office and say, look, this is what your manager sent me, and I don't want this to be sent to me.
So creepy.
You got to do something about it. And guess what? If that PR person does not walk into HR, that PR person doesn't walk into the general manager, that person doesn't walk into the owner, then that person's going to be fired. Because, it basically can't stop there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tricky. This
is why human resources has grown to be such a big part of corporate America.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.